Welcome to the Talking ETV book club slash podcast. Y'all know what we doing. Y'all know what we doing. We are continuing our journey reading all of the Harry Potter books. For those that are new here, hi, my name is Mashawn. Walking Dead is my favorite show of all time, so the book club really started with me reading all 193 issues of the comics, and those are not podcasts. They're on YouTube on my channel. They were lives. We he'd and ha-ha'd down for hours upon hours upon hours. I got a playlist for each compendium, so if you want to see those are on YouTube. So for anything that I'm reacting to and I feel like I need to read the source material, we just gonna have to get into it. Thus the book club was born. So Harry Potter is the first thing that's officially like a book club podcast. You can listen to it on podcast. I got it on YouTube, all of the things. So we were at the first book and I liked the first book more than the first movie so far. Now we on the second book. We will see if I like the second book more than the second movie. I have cut down reactions to all 8 of the movies on YouTube. All full uncut reactions and my reaction to Return to Hogwarts are all on my site. Always the top link in the description. So yeah, y'all, we just gonna get into it. And I'm doing a lot of reading today because I only gave y'all one chapter last time. We only did chapter 5. And I usually do at least 2 chapters every time. Well, every time I've always done 2 chapters. But last time I had shit to do, I only gave y'all 1 chapter. So we about to read today, okay? We'll see how far we get, but we about to start with chapter 6, and I'm excited because I ain't read in a minute, and I'm loving these books. Like J.K. Rowling, let me tell you something, that white lady snapped when she made these books, okay? When she was in that little apartment in London, wherever she was at, she did her thing when she wrote these books. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Chapter 6 is titled Gilderoy Lockhart. Y'all, look at the picture for the chapter. Remember them little things when they was at school that they pulled out the dirt like a plant that was screaming? I can't remember what they called. I know I told y'all I was going to quit moving, but I'm moving again soon. So I'm going to have to figure out a setup at some point. Spoiler alert, I'm moving again soon. I have such a big vision of what the book club setup going to be. Just stay tuned, okay? Because the position I'm sitting in right now is as comfortable as I'm going to get with this setup, okay? I got to make it do what it do. All right. The next day, however, Harry barely grinned once. Things started to go downhill from breakfast in the Great Hall. The 4 long house tables were laden with tureens of porridge, plates of kippers. Kippers is little fish, right? Oh, we must Google. Also, to anybody that's new here, these are like reactions. This is a proper book club. We talking about it in the comments. We Googling shit so we can know what it is. If you want a read through, baby, this is not the channel for you. Like, and it's so funny because I read the comments on these Harry Potter, the book club videos, and y'all are loving the fact that we actually like research what this shit is. Yeah, kipper is a fish. A kipper is a whole herring, a small oily fish that has been split in a butterfly fashion from head to tail along the dorsal ridge. Okay, so yeah, this is how they cut the fish. I knew it was fish. I didn't know it was a herring. I mean, for breakfast, I mean, they were eating literal weasel sandwiches. That's fucking disgusting, but that's another conversation. The 4 long house tables were laden with tureens of porridge, plates of kippers, mountains of toast, and dishes of eggs and bacon. Beneath the enchanted ceiling, today a dull cloudy gray, Harry and Ron sat at the Gryffindor table next to Hermione, who had her copy of Voyages with Vampires propped open against a milk jug. There was a slight stiffness in the way she said morning, which told Harry that she was still disapproving of the way they had arrived. Neville Longbottom, on the other hand, greeted them cheerfully. Neville was round-faced and accident-prone boy with the worst memory of anyone Harry had ever met. Bless Neville. Y'all know we love Neville over here. Neville deserves all of our love and respect. And I like Neville. And then when he came through at the end of the movies with the motherfucking Gryffindor sword, like, y'all better quit playing with him. Mail's due any minute. I think Gran's sending a few things I forgot. Harry had only just started his porridge when, sure enough, there was a rushing sound overhead, and 100 or so owls streamed in, circling the hall and dropping letters and packages into the chattering crowd. A big, lumpy package bounced off Neville's head, and a second later, something large and gray fell into Hermione's jug, spraying them all with milk and feathers. Errol, said Ron, pulling the beraggled owl out by his feet. Errol slumped, unconscious, onto the table, his legs in the air, and a damp red envelope in his beak. Oh no, Ron gasped. It's all right, he's still alive, said Hermione, prodding Errol gently with the tip of her finger. It's not that. It's that. Ron was pointing at the red envelope. It looked quite ordinary to Harry, but Ron and Neville were both looking at it as though they had expected it to explode. What's the matter? Said Harry. She sent me a howler, said Ron faintly. You better open it, Ron, said Neville in a timid whisper. It'll be worse if you don't. My gran sent me one once and I ignored it, and it was horrible. He gulped, y'all. That's why I gulped. Harry looked from their petrified faces to the red envelope. What's a howler? He said. But Ron's whole attention was fixed on the letter, which had begun to smoke at the corners. Open it, Neville urged. It'll all be over in a few minutes. Ron stretched out a shaking hand, eased the envelope from Errol's beak, and slid it open. Neville stuffed his fingers in his ears, and a split second later, Harry knew why. He thought for a moment it had exploded. A roar of sound filled the huge hall, shaking dust from the ceiling. Ooh, Ron getting cussed out, baby. This in all caps. Look, y'all. I mean, I know this ain't nobody but Ron mama cussing him smooth out for the shenanigans with the flying car in the last chapter. Should I cuss him out like how his mama would? Stealing the car? I would have been surprised if they'd expelled you. You wait till I get a hold of you. I don't suppose you stopped to think what your father and I went through when we saw it was gone. Mrs. Weasley's yells, 100 times louder than usual, made the plates and spoons rattle on the table and echoed deafeningly off the stone walls. People throughout the hall were swiveled around to see who had received the howler, and Ron sank so low in his chair that only his crimson forehead could be seen. Letter from Dumbledore last night? I thought your father would die of shame. We didn't bring you up to behave like this. You and Harry could have both died. Harry had been wondering when his name was going to crop up. He tried very hard not to look as though he couldn't hear the voice that was making his eardrums throb. Absolutely disgusted! Your father's facing an inquiry at work. It's entirely your fault. And if you put another toe out of line, we'll bring you straight back home. A ringing silence fell. The red envelope, which had dropped from Ron's hand, burst into flames and curled into ashes. Harry and Ron sat stunned, as though a tidal wave had just passed over them. A few people laughed, and gradually a babble of talk broke out again. Hermione closed Voyager with Vampires and looked down at the top of Ron's head. Well, I don't know what you expected, Ron, but don't tell me I deserved it, snapped Ron. Harry pushed his porridge away. His insides were burning with guilt. Mr. Weasley was facing an inquiry at work. After all, Mr. and Mrs. Weasley had done for him over the summer. But he had no time to dwell on this. Professor McGonagall was moving along the Gryffindor table, handing out course schedules. Harry took his and saw that they had double Herbology with the Hufflepuffs first. Harry, Ron, and Hermione left the castle together, crossed the vegetable patch, and made for the greenhouses, where the magical plants were kept. At least the howler had done one good thing. Hermione seemed to think that they had now been punished enough and was being perfectly friendly again. As they neared the greenhouses, they saw the rest of the class standing outside, waiting for Professor Sprout. Harry, Ron, and Hermione had only just joined them when she came striding into view across the lawn, accompanied by Gilderoy Lockhart. Professor Sprout's arms were full of bandages, and, with another twinge of guilt, Harry spotted the Whomping Willow in the distance. Ooh, them kids in that damn tree. Several of its branches now in slings. Professor Sprout was a sat a little wi- Professor Sprout was a squat little witch who wore a patched hat over her flyaway hair. There was usually a large amount of earth on her clothes, and fingernails would have made Aunt Petunia faint. Gilderoy Lockhart, however, was immaculate in sweeping robes of turquoise, his golden hair shining under a perfectly positioned turquoise hat with gold trimming. "Oh, hello there," he called, beaming around at the assembled students. "Just been showing Professor Sprout the right way to doctor a whopping willow." "Oh, so they the ones that had just fixed up the tree." "But I don't want you running away with that idea. I'm better at herbology than she is. I just happen to have met several of these exotic plants on my travels." "Greenhouse 3 today, chaps." Oh, this is the number greenhouse because obviously they would have more than one. "Greenhouse 3 today, chaps," said Professor Sprout, who was looking distinctly disgruntled, not all of her usual cheerful self. There was a murmur of interest. They had only ever worked in Greenhouse 1 before. Greenhouse 3 housed far more interesting and dangerous plants. Professor Sprout took a large key from her belt and unlocked the door. Harry caught a whiff of a damp earth and fertilizer mingling with the heavy perfume of some giant umbrella-sized flowers dangling from the ceiling. He was about to follow Ron and Hermione inside when Lockhart's hand shot out. "Harry, I've been wanting a word. If you don't mind, here's a couple of minutes." "Oh, if you don't mind if he's a couple of minutes late. Do you, Professor Sprout?" Judging by Professor Sprout's scowl, she didn't mind, but Lockhart said, "That's the ticker. That's the ticket," and closed the greenhouse door in her face. "Harry," said Lockhart, his huge white teeth gleaming in the sunlight as he shook his head. "Harry, Harry, Harry." Completely nonplussed, Harry said nothing. "When I heard, well, of course it was all my fault. Could have kicked myself." Harry had no idea what he was talking about. "I swear to God, if this motherfucker is the reason that platform 9 3/4, the goddamn gate didn't open up and lock them out." Okay, hold on. He was about to say so when Lockhart went on. "Don't know when I've been more shocked. Flying a car to Hogwarts? Well, of course. I knew at once why'd you done it. Stood out a mile." Harry, Harry, Harry. It was remarkable how he could show every one of those brilliant teeth even when he wasn't talking. "Give you a taste of publicity, didn't I?" said Lockhart. "Gave you the bug. You got onto the front page of the paper with me and you couldn't wait to do it again." "Oh, no, Professor, see, Harry, Harry, Harry," said Lockhart, reaching out and grasping his shoulder. "I understand. Natural to want a bit more once you've had that first taste, and I blame myself for giving you that because I was bound to go to your head." This nigga think Harry is a fame whore. Stop it. "But see here, young man, you can't start flying cars trying to get yourself noticed. Just calm down, all right? Plenty of time for all that when you're older. Yes, yes, I know what you're thinking. It's all right from him. He's an internationally famous wizard already. But when I was 12, I was just as much of a nobody as you are now." Well, actually, that's a lie because you didn't survive Voldemort trying to kill you as a literal infant, not even able to walk yet, sir. So calm down. "In fact, I say I was even more of a nobody. I mean, a few people have heard of you, haven't they? All that business and he who must not be named." He glanced at the lightning scar on Harry's forehead. I know. It's not quite as good as winning Witchy's Weekly Most Charming Smile Award 5 times in a row, as I have, but it's a start, Harry. It's a start." He gave Harry a hearty wink and strode off. Harry stood stunned for a few seconds. Then, remembering he was supposed to be in the greenhouse, he opened the door and slid inside. Professor Sprout was standing behind a trestle bench. Y'all, what is a trestle? Let us hit the Google. Because, I'm assuming a trestle is some kind of tree.
Trestle.
Okay, so I pronounced it right, of course. A framework consisting of horizontal beams supported by 2 pairs of sloping legs, used in pairs to support a flat surface, such as a tabletop. So it's just a way of, okay. Oh, it's this kind of bench. Y'all know this kind of bench? Okay. They could have just said bench, but they specified trestle bench. It's the details. Professor Sprout was standing behind a trestle bench in the center of the greenhouse. About 20 pairs of different color earmuffs were lying on the bench. Oh, that's because that plant about to start screaming in their ear. When Harry had taken his place between Ron and Hermione, she said, "We'll be repotting mandrakes today. Now, who can tell me the properties of the mandrake?" To nobody's surprise, Hermione's hand was first into the air. Mandrake, and of course she got the scientific name too, mandragora, is a powerful restorative, said Hermione, sounding as usual as though she had swallowed the textbook. It is used to return people who have been transfigured or cursed to their original state. Excellent! 10 points to Gryffindor, said Professor Sprout. The mandrake forms an essential part of most antidotes. It is also, however, dangerous. Who can tell me why? Hermione's hand narrowly missed Harry's glasses as it shot up again. The cry of the mandrake is fatal to anyone who hears it, she said promptly. Precisely. Take another 10 points, said Professor Sprout. Now the mandrakes we have here are still very young. She pointed to a row of deep trays as she spoke, and everyone shuffled forward for a better look. 100 or so tufty little plants, purplish green in color, were growing there in rows. They looked quite unremarkable to Harry, who didn't have the slightest idea what Hermione meant by the cry of the mandrake. Everyone take a pair of earmuffs, said Professor Sprout. There was a scramble as everyone tried to seize a pair that wasn't pink and fluffy. When I tell you to put them on, make sure your ears are completely covered, said Professor Sprout. When it is safe to remove them, I will give you the thumbs up. Right. Earmuffs on. Harry snapped the earmuffs over his ears. They shut out sound completely. Professor Sprout put the pink fluffy pair over her own ears, rolled up the sleeves of her robes, grasped one of the fluffy plants firmly, and pulled hard. Harry let out a gasp of surprise that no one could hear. Instead of roots, a small, muddy, and extremely ugly baby popped out of the earth. The leaves were growing right out of its head. He had a pale green, mottled skin and was clearly bawling at the top of his lungs. Professor Sprout took a large plant pot from under the table and plunged the mandrake into it, burying him in the dark, damp compost until only the tufted leaves were visible. Professor Sprout dusted off her hands, gave them all the thumbs up, and removed her own earmuffs. As our mandrakes are only seedlings, their cries won't kill yet, she said calmly, as though she'd just done nothing more exciting than water a begonia. However, they will knock you out for several hours, and I'm sure none of you want to miss your first day back. Make sure your earmuffs are securely in place while you work. I will attract your attention when it's time to pack up. 4 to a tray. There is a large supply of pots here. Compost in the sacks over there, and be careful of the venomous tentacula. It's teething. A plant teething. She gave a sharp slap to a spiky dark red plant as she spoke, making it draw in the long feelers that had been inching sneakily over her shoulder. So it was a plant touching her. She gave a sharp slap to a spiky dark red plant as she spoke, making it draw the long feelers that had been inching sneakily over her shoulder. Harry, Ron, and Hermione were joined at their tray by a curly-haired Hufflepuff boy Harry knew by sight but had never spoken to. Justin Finch-Fletchy, he said brightly. Y'all, I'm not going to remember how to say that. Justin Finch-Fletchy? Finch-Fletchy. I might remember that. He said brightly, shaking Harry by the hand. Know who you are, of course. The famous Harry Potter. And you're Hermione Granger. Always on top of everything. Always on top in everything. I wonder what they're going to have to say about Ron. Hermione beamed as she had her hand shaken too. And Ron Weasley. Wasn't that your flying car? Ron didn't smile. The howler was obviously still on his mind. That Lockhart something, isn't he? Said Justin happily as they began filling their plant pots with dragon dung compost. That is something really good to do with all that dragon doo-doo, is make compost. Awfully brave chap. Have you read his books? I'd die of fear if I had been cornered in a telephone booth by a werewolf, but he stayed cool, and that, just fantastic. My name was down for Eton, you know. I can't tell you how glad I am I came here instead. Of course, Mother was slightly disappointed, but since I had made her read Lockhart's books, I think she began to see how useful it'll be to have a fully trained wizard in the family. After that, they didn't have much chance to talk. Their earmuffs were back on, and they needed to concentrate on the mandrakes. Professor Sprout had made it look extremely easy, but it wasn't. I bet you them babies is heavy, and they be kicking. The mandrakes didn't like coming out of the earth, but it didn't seem to want to go back in either. They squirmed, kicked, flared their sharp little fists, and gnashed their teeth. Harry spent 10 whole minutes trying to squash a particularly fat one into a pot. By the end of the class, Harry, like everyone else, was sweaty, aching, and covered in earth. Everyone traipsed. I've never seen this word before. Let us hit the Google. If I can remember the damn password to unlock my phone. TRAIPSED. I mean, I'm sure that means, I know what it means with context clues, like they're tired. So they're probably literally dragging themselves back into the castle. But it's spelled TRAIPSED.
Traipse.
Yeah, traipse. So they traipsed. Walk or move wearily or reluctantly. Exactly. Yeah, so they just walking, okay? Everyone traipsed back to the castle for a quick wash, then the Gryffindors hurried off to Transfiguration. Professor McGonagall's classes were always hard work, but today was especially difficult. Everything Harry had learned last year seemed to have leaked out of his mind, leaked out of his head during the summer. He was supposed to be turning a beetle into a button, but all he managed to do was give his beetle a lot of exercise as it scuttled over the desktop, avoiding his wand. Ron was having far worse troubles. He patched up his wand with some borrowed spello tape, but it seemed to be damaged beyond repair. It kept crackling and sparking at odd moments, and every time Ron tried to transfigure his beetle, it engulfed him in thick gray smoke that smelled of rotten eggs. Unable to see what he was doing, Ron accidentally squashed his beetle with his elbow, and he had to ask for a new one. Professor McGonagall wasn't pleased. Harry was relieved to hear the lunch bell. His brain felt like a wrung sponge. A wrung sponge. Love that analogy. Everyone filed out of the classroom except him and Ron, who was whacking his hand furiously on the desk. Stupid, useless thing. Right home for another one, Harry suggested as the wand let off a volley of bangs like a firecracker. Oh, yeah, and get another howler back, said Ron, stuffing the now hissing wand into his bag. It's your own fault your wand got snapped. They went down to lunch, where Ron's mood was not improved by Hermione showing them the handful of perfect coat buttons she had produced in Transfiguration. What have we got this afternoon? Said Harry, hastily changing the subject. Defense against the dark arts, said Hermione at once. Why? Demanded Ron, seizing her schedule. Have you outlined all Lockhart's lessons in little hearts? Hermione snatched the schedule back, blushing furiously. They finished lunch and went outside into the overcast courtyard. Hermione sat down on a stone step and buried her nose in Voyagers with. Why they keep. You see, they keep emphasizing what book Hermione is reading. This is about the 4th, 5th time I done said Voyages with Vampires. I know this is Gilderoy Lockhart book. I get it. And I don't remember Gilderoy Lockhart in the movies. Y'all, the Harry Potter nerds gonna have to let me know. Harry and Ron stood talking about Quidditch for several minutes before Harry became aware that he was being closely watched. Looking up, he saw the very small, mousy-haired boy he'd seen trying on the sorting hat last night, staring at Harry as though transfixed. He was clutching what looked like an ordinary Muggle camera, and the moment Harry looked at him, he went bright red. All right, Harry. All right, Harry? I'm Colin Creevy, he said breathlessly, taking a tentative step forward. I'm in Gryffindor, too. Do you think it would be all right if I can have a picture? He said, raising the camera hopefully. A picture? Harry repeated blankly. So I can prove I've met you, said Colin. See, I don't know if this child really is nervous and happy to meet Harry or if this is like some bullshit where they're going to use Harry picture for some shit. I don't know. Y'all know, I don't, these books make me not trust nobody. So I can prove I've met you, said Colin Creevy eagerly, edging further forward. I know all about you. Everyone's told me about how you survived when you know who tried to kill you and how he disappeared and everything and how you still got a lightning scar on your forehead. His eyes raked Harry's headline. And a boy in my dormitory said if I developed the film in the right potion, the pictures will move. Oh, okay. He want a live photo. Okay. Colin drew a great shuddering breath of excitement and said, It's amazing here, isn't it? I never knew all the odd stuff I could do with this magic till I got the letter from Hogwarts. My dad's a milkman. He couldn't believe it either. So I'm taking loads of pictures to send home to him, and it'd be really good if I had one of you. He looked imploringly at Harry. Maybe your friend could take it and I could stand next to you? And then could you sign it? I mean, this is like a proper fanboy moment. Signed photos? You're giving out signed photos, Potter? Of course it's Draco. Like, I know it's Draco. Why is you over here in my business? This is an Ambi conversation. Signed photos? You're giving out signed photos, Potter? Loud and scathing, Draco Malfoy's voice echoed around the courtyard. He had stopped right behind Colin, flanked, as he always was at Hogwarts, by his large and thuggish cronies, Crabbe and Goyle. Oh, I forget their names. Yeah, Crabbe and Goyle. I remember them. Everyone line up, Malfoy roared to the crowd. Harry Potter's giving out signed photos. No, I'm not, Harry said angrily, his fist clenching. Shut up, Malfoy. You're just jealous, piped up Colin. Ooh! Whose entire body was about as thick as Crabbe's neck. Jealous, said Malfoy, who didn't need to shout anymore. Half the courtyard was listening in. Of what? I don't want a foul scar right across my forehead. Thanks. I don't think getting your head cut open makes you that special myself. Crabbe and Goyle were sniggering stupidly. Eat slugs, Malfoy, said Ron angrily. Crabbe stopped laughing and started rubbing his knuckles in a menacing way. Boy, ain't nobody scared of you. I'm telling you, ain't nobody ever rubbed their knuckles and made me scared. Be careful, Weasley, sneered Malfoy. You don't want to start any trouble, or your or your mummy. It's not funny. Or your mummy will have to come take you away from school. He put on a shrill, piercing voice. If you put another toe out of line. A knot of Slytherin's fifth years nearby laughed loudly at this. Weasley would like a signed photo, Potter, smirked Malfoy. It'd be worth more than his family's whole house. Again, Malfoy, not too much on the Weasleys, okay? Because I've never met a Weasley that I didn't like, and I'm gonna need for you to get off of them, okay? Stop it. Ron whipped out his spello-taped wand, but Hermione shut voyages with vampires with a snap and whispered, Look out! What's all this? What's all this? Gilderoy Lockhart was striding toward them, his turquoise robes swirling behind him. Who's giving out signed photos? Harry started to speak, but he was cut short as Lockhart flung an arm around his shoulders and thundered jovially. Should have asked. We meet again, Harry. Pinned to Lockhart's side and burning with humiliation, Harry saw Malfoy slide smirk back into the crowd. Come on then, Mr. Creevy, said Lockhart, beaming at Colin. A double portrait. Can't do better than that. We'll both sign it for you. Lockhart likes too much attention for me. Nobody's talking to you. Like, nobody, you invited yourself into this situation. Colin fumbled for his camera and took the picture as the bell rang behind him, signaling the start of afternoon classes. Off you go. Move along here. Move along there, Lockhart called to the crowd, and he set off back to the castle with Harry, who was wishing he knew a good vanishing spell, still clasped to his side. A word to the wise, Harry, said Lockhart paternally as they entered the building through a side door. I covered up for you back there with young Creevy. If he was photographing me too, your schoolmates won't think you're setting yourself up too much. Deaf to Harry's stammers, Lockhart swept him down a corridor lined with staring students and up a staircase. Let me just say that handing out signed pictures at this stage of your career isn't sensible. Looks a tad bit big-headed. Harry, to be frank, there may well come a time when, like me, you'll need to keep a stack handy wherever you go, but he gave a little chortle. I don't think you're quite there yet. They had reached Lockhart's classroom, and he had let Harry go at last. I don't know if... Okay, so there's a couple of things with Gilderoy Lockhart. He's projecting. That's for damn sure. He is projecting. He ain't asked Harry a damn question. He just starts talking to Harry and explaining shit to Harry as if Harry has had a conversation with him and told him how he felt. He is literally projecting on Harry. But I don't know if he's doing it on purpose. Or do he genuinely think he's helping Harry? Like, oh, Harry, you want to be famous. You want to be just like me. You want a lot of attention. Boy, just wait till you have your turn. Like, I don't know if he doing this shit on purpose. Harry yanked his robe straight and headed for a seat at the very back of the class where he buried himself with piling all 7 of Lockhart's books in front of him so that he could avoid looking at the real thing. The rest of the class came cluttering in, and Ron and Hermione sat down on either side of Harry. You could have fried an egg on your face, said Ron. You better hope Creevy doesn't meet Ginny, or they'll start a Harry Potter fan club. Shut up, snapped Harry. The last thing he needed was for Lockhart to hear the phrase Harry Potter fan club. When the whole class was seated, Lockhart cleared his throat loudly and silence fell. He reached forward, picked up Neville Longbottom's copy of Travels with Trolls, and held it up to show his own winking portrait on the front. Y'all, is this man a fraud? Or is he really that nigga? Like, why has he wrote so many books? Why has he written so many books? I don't know. They just focusing on him a lot, and I want to know why. Me, he said, pointing at it and winking as well. Gilderoy Lockhart, Order of Merlin, 3rd class, honorary member of the Dark Force Against Defense League, and 5-time winner of Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile World. But I don't talk about that. I didn't get rid of the abandoned banshee by smiling at her. He waited for them to laugh. A few people smiled weakly. I see you've all bought a complete set of my books. Well done. I thought we start today with a little quiz. God damn! First day we starting with a quiz? Nothing to worry about. Just to check how well you've read them, how much you've taken in. When he had handed out the test papers, he returned to the front of the class and said, You have 30 minutes. Start now. Harry looked down at his paper and read. We're on page 100 now, y'all. What is Gilderoy Lockhart's favorite color? I'm so sick of this nigga because you are not teaching me any fucking thing. I do not. You might as well have written an autobiography. You giving me this kind of quiz. What is Gilderoy Lockhart's favorite color? What is Gilderoy Lockhart's secret ambition? What, in your opinion, is Gilderoy Lockhart's greatest achievement to date? On and on it went over 3 sides of paper, right down to number 54. Those first I just read was numbers 1, 2, and 3, by the way, y'all. I'm sorry. I didn't say 1, 2, and 3. 54. When is Gilderoy Lockhart's birthday, and what would his ideal gift be? I bet you Hermione know all of these. Half an hour later, Lockhart collected the papers and rifled through them in front of the class. Tut tut. Hardly any of you remember that my favorite color is lilac. I say so in Year with the Yeti, and a few of you need to read Wanderings with Werewolves more carefully. I clearly stated in chapter 12 that my ideal birthday gift would be harmony between all magic and non-magic peoples, though I wouldn't say no to a large bottle of Ogden's Old Fire Whiskey. He gave them another roguish wink. Ron was now staring at Lockhart with an expression of disbelief on his face. Seamus Finnegan and Dean Thomas were sitting in front, shaking with silent laughter. No, for real, because he is fucking ridiculous. Literally, this is fucking ridiculous. Hermione, on the other hand, was listening to Lockhart with rapt attention and gave her a start when he mentioned her name. But Miss Hermione Granger knew my secret ambition is to rid the world of evil and market my own range of hair care potions. Hair care potions? Hold on, I couldn't even say that without trying not to laugh. But Miss Hermione Granger knew my secret ambition is to rid the world of evil and market my own range of hair care potions. Good girl. In fact, he flipped her paper over. Full marks. Where's Miss Hermione Granger? Hermione raised a trembling hand. Excellent, beamed Lockhart. Quite excellent. Take 10 points for Gryffindor. And so, to business? He bent down behind his desk and lifted a large covered cage onto it. Now, be warned. It is my job to arm you against the foulest creatures known to wizard kind. You may find yourselves facing your worst fears in this room. Know only that no harm can befall you whilst I am here. All I ask is that you remain calm. Jesus Christ, please don't be a spider. In spite of himself, Harry leaned around his pile of books for a better look at the cage. Lockhart placed a hand over the cover. Dean and Seamus had stopped laughing now. Neville was cowering in his front row seat. "I must ask you not to scream," said Lockhart in a low voice. It might provoke them." What is he about to show these kids? The fuck is going on? I'm scared. As the whole class held its breath, Lockhart whipped off the cover. "Yes," he said dramatically. "Freshly caught Cornish pixies." I gotta Google this, because if it ain't, I doubt anybody has pictures of this, but I need to see what it looks like in Harry Potter world. Cornish pixies. Cornish Pixies is a song by John Williams. Oh, those fuckers. These blue things, y'all. And Harry Potter. These fuckers. Them damn blue things. Okay, I remember those. That's why I be having Google shit, because I would have not remembered that's what it was called. Seamus Finnegan couldn't control himself. He let out a snort of laughter, then even Lockhart couldn't mistake for a scream of terror. "Yes," he smiled at Seamus. "Well, they're not very dangerous, are they?" Seamus choked. "Don't be so sure," said Lockhart, waggling a finger annoyingly at Seamus. "Devilish tricky little blighters they can be." The pixies were electric blue and about 8 inches high, with high, pointed faces and voices so shrill it was like listening to a lot of budgies arguing. The moment the cover had been removed, they had started jabbering and rocketing around, rattling the bars and making bizarre faces at the people nearest them. "Right then," Lockhart said loudly. "Let's see what you make of them." And he opened the cage. It was pandemonium. The pixies shot in every direction like rockets. Two of them seized Neville by the ears and lifted him into the air. Of course, they started with Neville. Several shot straight through the windows, showering the back row with broken glass. The rest proceeded to wreck the classroom more effectively than a rampaging rhino. They grabbed ink bottles and sprayed the class with them, shredded books and papers, tore pictures from the walls, upended the wastebasket, grabbed bags and books, and threw them out of the smashed window. Within minutes, half the class was sheltering under desks, and Neville was swinging from the iron chandelier in the ceiling. "Come on now, round them up. Round them up. They're only pixies," Lockhart shouted. He rolled up his sleeves, brandished his wand, and bellowed. Hold on, I want to make sure I get this spell right. He said, "Pisky pisky." Oh, it's pesky pisky. Pessy pixie. Pesternomi. Pesky pixie. Pesternomi. There we go. It had absolutely no effect. One of the pixies seized his wand and threw it out of the window too. I asked y'all, is Lockhart a fucking scam? I can't think of the word I used earlier, but y'all know what I meant. Lockhart gulped and dived under his own desk. I feel like Hermione gonna save the day. He said pesky pixie pesternomi, so that's clearly not the right spell. Yeah, it had absolutely no effect. One of the pixies seized his wand and threw it out of the window too. Lockhart gulped and dived under his own desk, narrowly avoiding being squashed by Neville, who fell a second later as the chandelier gave way. The bell rang, and there was a mad rush toward an exit. In the relative calm that followed, Lockhart straightened up, caught sight of Harry, Ron, and Hermione, who were almost at the door, and said, "Well, I'll ask you three to nip the rest of them back into their cage." He swept past them and shut the door quickly behind him. "What kind of teacher is this nigga?" "Can you believe him?" roared Ron as one of the remaining pixies bit him painfully in the ear. "He just wants to give us some hands-on experience," said Hermione, immobilizing two pixies at once with a clever freezing charm and stuffing them back into their cage. "Hands-on?" said Harry, who was trying to grab a pixie dancing out of reach with the tongue out. Hermione, he didn't have a clue what he was doing. "Rubbish," said Hermione. "You've read his books. Look at all those amazing things he's done." He says he's done, Ron muttered. Exactly. The only thing that we know is probably true is him winning Best Smile. That was good, y'all. That was chapter 6. I'm about to read chapter 7. All right, y'all. This still Chamber of Secrets, right? Yeah, I'll be tripping sometimes. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, chapter 7. Mud, Bloods, and Murmurs. Y'all know I don't like it when they use the word mud blood, especially when they talking about Hermione, because we do not use that kind of slander to describe her. I don't know who this supposed to be in this picture, but it's just who it is. It looked like worms in a cauldron. I don't fucking know. Let's see. Harry spent a lot of time over the next few days dodging out of sight whenever he saw Gilderoy Lockhart coming down the corridor. I'm telling you, this nigga is not real. He is not everything that he say he is. Harder to avoid was Colin Creevy, who seemed to have memorized Harry's schedule. Yeah, fanboy, I'm gonna need for you to calm down, because we is at school, please. Nothing seemed to give Colin a bigger thrill than to say, "All right, Harry," 6 or 7 times a day in here. "Hello, Colin." Back, however exasperated Harry sounded when he said it. Hedwig was still angry with Harry about the disastrous card journey. And Ron's wand was still malfunctioning, surpassing itself on Friday morning by shooting out of Ron's hand in charms and hitting tiny old Professor Flitwick squarely between the eyes, creating a large, thriving green boil where it had struck. Oh my God. So, with one thing and another, Harry was quite glad to reach the weekend. He, Ron, and Hermione were planning to visit Hagrid on Saturday. Okay, thank you. Cause the last chapter when they said they was going outside, I thought they was going to Hagrid house, but they ended up going to the greenhouse, obviously. So good, cause I want to see Hagrid. Harry, however, was shaken awake several hours earlier than he would have liked by Oliver Wood, captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team. "What's the matter?" said Harry groggily. "Quidditch practice," said Wood. "Come on." Harry squinted at the window. There was a thin mist hanging across the pink and gold sky. Now that he was awake, he couldn't understand how he could have slept through the racket the birds were making. "Oliver," Harry croaked, "it's the crack of dawn." "Exactly," said Wood. He was a tall and burly 6-year, and at the moment his eyes were gleaming with a crazed enthusiasm. "It's a part of our new training program. Come on, grab your broom and let's go," said Wood heartily. "None of the other teams have started training yet. We're going to be first off the mark this year." Yawning and shivering slightly, Harry climbed out of bed and tried to find his Quidditch robes. "Good man," said Wood. "Meet you on the field in 15 minutes." When he'd found the scarlet When he found his scarlet team robes and pulled on his cloak for warmth, Harry scribbled a note to Ron explaining where he had gone and went down the spiral staircase to the common room. His Nimbus 2000 on his shoulder, he had just reached the portrait hole when there was a clatter behind him and Colin Creevy came dashing down the spiral staircase, his camera swinging madly around his neck. I'm imagining it like a cartoon in my head. That's funny. And something clutched in his hand. "I heard someone saying your name on the stairs, Harry. Look what I've got here. I've had it developed. I wanted to show you." First of all, Colin, it is the crack of dawn and you're chasing me down the fucking stairs as I'm half asleep trying to get to Quidditch practice. Calm down. Harry looked bemusely at the photograph Colin was brandishing under his nose. A moving black and white Lockhart was tugging hard on an arm Harry recognized as his own. He was pleased to see that his photographic self was putting up a good fight and refusing to be dragged into view. As Harry watched, Lockhart gave up and slumped, panting against the white edge of the picture. "Will you sign it?" said Colin eagerly. "No," said Harry flatly, glancing around to check that the room was really deserted. "Sorry, Colin. I'm in a hurry. Quidditch practice." He climbed through the portrait hole. "Oh, wow. Wait for me. I've never watched a Quidditch game before." This child just don't quit. Colin scrambled through the hole after him. "It'll be really boring," Harry said quickly, but Colin ignored him, his face shining with excitement. "You were the youngest house player in 100 years, weren't you, Harry? Weren't you?" said Colin, trotting alongside him. "You must be brilliant. I've never flown. Is it easy? Is that your own broom? Is that the best one there is? Harry didn't know how to get rid of him. It was like having an extremely talkative shadow. I don't really understand Quidditch, said Colin breathlessly. Is it true that there are four balls, and two of them flying around and trying to knock people off their brooms? Yes, said Harry heavily, resigned to explain the complicated rules of Quidditch. They're called bludgers. There are two beaters, one on each team, who carry clubs to beat the bludgers away from their side. Fred and George Weasley are the Gryffindor beaters. And I mean, what better beaters could you have than Fred and George Weasley? Thing one and thing two, as I call them. And what are the other balls for? Colin asked, tripping down a couple of steps because he was gazing open mouthed at Harry. Well, the quaffle, that's the biggest red one, is the one that scores the goals. Three chasers on each team throw the quaffle. Hold on, because you got to loosen your mouth up to say quaffle. Hold on. Well, the quaffle, that's the biggest red one, is the one that scores goals. Three chasers on each team throw the quaffle to each other and try to get it through the goal post at the end of the pitch. There are three long poles with hoops on the end. And the fourth ball is the golden snitch, said Harry. It's very small, very, very fast, and difficult to catch. But that's what the seekers got to do, because a game of Quidditch doesn't end until the snitch has been caught. And whenever the team seeker gets the snitch, earn his teams an extra 150 points. And you're the Gryffindor seeker, aren't you? Said Colin in awe. Yes, said Harry as they left the castle and started across the dew-drenched grass. And there's the keeper, too. He guards the posts. That's it, really. Oh, no, that's Harry's voice. And there's the keeper, too. He guards the goalpost. That's it, really. But Colin didn't stop questioning Harry all the way down the sloping lawns to the Quidditch field. And Harry only shook him off when he reached the changing rooms. Colin called after him in a piping voice, I'll go and get a good seat, Harry, and hurried off to the stands. The rest of the Gryffindor team were already in the changing room. Wood was the only person who looked truly awake. Fred and George Weasley were sitting, puffy-eyed and tousled hair, next to fourth year Alicia. Who is Alicia Spinnet? I didn't even realize that they have girls on the Quidditch team. That gotta be a girl. Next to fourth year Alicia Spinnet, who seemed to be nodding off against the wall behind her. Her fellow chasers, Katie Bell and Angelina Johnson, were yawning side by side opposite them. Y'all, I never paid no attention that there are female seekers. There you are, Harry. What kept you? Said Wood briskly. Now, I wanted a quick talk with you all before we actually got onto the field because I spent the summer devising a whole new training program, which I really think will make all the difference. Wood was holding up a large diagram of a Quidditch field on which were drawn many lines, arrows, and crosses in different colored inks. He took out his wand, tapped the board, and the arrows began to wiggle over the diagram like caterpillars. As Wood launched into a speech about his new tactics, Fred Weasley's head drooped right into Alicia Spinner's shoulder, and he began to snore. The first board took nearly 20 minutes to explain, but there was another board under that, and a third under that one. Harry sank into a stupor as Wood droned on and on. So, said Wood, at long last, jerking Harry from a wistful fantasy at about what he could be eating for breakfast at this very moment up at the castle. Is that clear? Any questions? I've got a question, Oliver, said George, who had woken with a start. Why couldn't you have told us all this yesterday when we were awake? Wood wasn't pleased. Now listen here, you lot, he said, glowering at them all. We should have won that Quidditch Cup last year. We were easily the best team. But, unfortunately, owing to circumstances beyond our control, Harry shifted guiltily in his seat. He had been unconscious in the hospital wing for the final match of the previous year, meaning that Gryffindor had been a player short and had suffered their worst defeat in 300 years. Wood took a moment to regain control of himself. Their last defeat was clearly still torturing him. So, this year we trained harder than ever before. Okay, let's go put our new theories into practice, Wood shouted, seizing his broomstick and leading the way out of the locker rooms. Stiff-legged and still yawning, his team followed. They had been in the locker room so long that the sun was completely up now, although remnants of mist hung over the grass in the stadium. As Harry walked onto the field, he saw Ron and Hermione sitting in the stands. Aren't you finished yet? Called Ron incredulously. Haven't even started, said Harry, looking jealously at the toast and marmalade Ron and Hermione had brought out of the Great Hall. Wood's been teaching us new moves. He mounted his broomstick and kicked at the ground, soaring up into the air. The cool morning air whipped his face, waking him far more effectively than Wood's long talk. It felt wonderful to be back on the Quidditch field. He soared right around the stadium at full speed, racing Fred and George. "What's that funny clicking noise?" called Fred as they hurtled around the corner. Harry looked into the stands. Colin was sitting in one of the highest seats, his camera raised, taking picture after picture. The sound strangely magnified in the deserted stadium. "Look this way, Harry! This way!" he cried shrilly. "Who's that?" said Fred. "No idea," Harry lied, putting on a spurt of speed that took him as far away as possible from Colin. "What's going on?" said Wood, frowning as he skimmed through the air toward them. "Why is the first year taking pictures?" "I don't like it. He could be a Slytherin spy trying to find out about our new training program." "He's in Gryffindor," said Harry quickly. "And the Slytherins don't need a spy, Oliver," said George. "What makes you say that?" said Wood testily. "Because they're here in person," said George, pointing. Several people in green robes were walking onto the field, broomsticks in their hands. "I don't believe it," Wood hissed in outrage. "I booked the field for today. We'll see about this." Wood shot toward the ground, landing rather harder than he meant to in his anger, staggering slightly as he dismounted. Harry, Fred, and George followed. "Flint!" Wood bellowed at the Slytherin captain. "This is our practice time. We've got specially. You can clear off now." Marcus Flint was even larger than Wood. He had look of trollish cunning on his face as he replied, "Plenty of room for all of us, Wood." Angelina, Alicia, and Katie had come over too. There were no girls on the Slytherin team, who stood shoulder to shoulder facing the Gryffindors, leering to a man. "But I booked the field," said Wood, positively spitting with rage. "I booked it." "Ah," said Flint, "but I've got a specially signed note here from Professor Snape." I'm not going to even try to do Snape voice because I'm not going to do it justice. "I, Professor S. Snape, give the Slytherin team's permission to practice today on the Quidditch field, owing to the need to train their new seeker." "Okay, fuck this letter. I booked the field. That's exactly how I would feel." "You've got a new seeker?" said Wood, distracted. "Where?" I would assume that it's Malfoy, right? Because Malfoy didn't play Quidditch in the first book, I don't think. And from behind the 6 large figures before them came a 7th smaller boy, smirking all over his pale, pointed face. It was Draco Malfoy. "Aren't you Lucius Malfoy's son?" said Fred, looking at Malfoy with dislike. "Funny you should mention Draco's father," said Flint, as the whole Slytherin team smiled still more broadly. "Let me show you the generous gift he's made to Slytherin team." All 7 of them held out their broomsticks. 7 highly polished brand new handles of 7 sets of fine gold lettering spelling the words Nimbus 2000 and 1 gleamed under the Gryffindor's noses in the early morning sun. "Very latest model. Only came out last month," said Flint carelessly, flicking a speck of dust from the end of his own. "I believe it outstrips the old Nimbus 2000 series by a considerable amount. As for the old clean sweeps," he smiled nastily at Fred and George, who were both clutching clean sweeps 5s. "Sweeps the board with him." None of the Gryffindor thing. I can't even talk. I'm getting pissed off. None of the Gryffindor team could think of anything to say for a moment. Malfoy was smirking so broadly, his cold eyes were reduced to slits. "Oh, look," said Flint. "A field invasion." Ron and Hermione were crossing the grass to see what was going on. "What's happening?" Ron asked Harry. "Why aren't you playing? And what's he doing here?" He was looking at Malfoy, taking in his Slytherin Quidditch robes. "I'm the new Slytherin Seeker, Weasley," said Malfoy smugly. "Everyone's just been admiring the brooms my father's bought our team." Ron gaped, open-mouthed, at the 7 superb broomsticks in front of him. "Good, aren't they?" said Malfoy smoothly. "But perhaps the Gryffindor team will be able to raise some gold and get some new brooms too. You could raffle off those cheap clean sweep 5s. I expect the museum would bid for them." The fact that he thinks this is funny is like so ridiculously lame. Like, I ain't even gonna lie to y'all. I'd be putting hands on Draco. The Slytherin team howled with laughter. "At least no one on the Gryffindor team had to buy their way in," said Hermione sharply. "They got in on pure talent." The smug look on Malfoy's face flickered. "No one asked your opinion, you filthy little mudblood," he spat. Harry knew at once that Malfoy had said something really bad because there was an instant uproar in his words. Flint had to dive in front of Malfoy to stop Fred and George jumping on him. Alicia shrieked, "How dare you!" And Ron plunged his hand into his robes and pulled out his wand, yelling, "You'll pay for that one, Malfoy," and pointed it furiously under Flint's arm in Malfoy's face. A loud bang echoed around the stadium, and a jet of green light shot out of the wrong end of Ron's wand, hitting him in the stomach and sending him reeling backwards onto the grass. "Ron! Ron! Are you all right?" squealed Hermione. Ron opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he gave an almighty belch, and several slugs dribbled out of his mouth into his lap. Jesus Christ, I'm so happy they didn't do that in movies. That's fucking disgusting. That's good, though, but that's disgusting. The Slytherin team were paralyzed with laughter. Flint was doubled up, hanging onto his broomstick for support. Malfoy was on all fours, banging the ground with his fists. The Gryffindors were gathered around Ron, who kept belching large, glistening slugs. Nobody seemed to want to touch him. "We better get him to Hagrid's. It's nearest," said Harry to Hermione, who nodded bravely, and the pair of them pulled Ron up by the arms. "What happened, Harry? What happened? Is he ill? But you can cure him, can't you?" Colin had run down from his seat and was now dancing alongside them as they left the field. Ron gave a huge heave as more slugs dribbled down his front. "Oof," said Colin, fascinated and raising his camera. "Can you hold him still, Harry?" "Get out of the way, Colin," said Harry angrily. Because my thing is now is not the time to be fucking taking pictures. "Nearly there, Ron," said Hermione as the gamekeeper's cabin. No. "Yeah, get out of the way, Colin," said Harry angrily. He and Hermione supported Ron out of the stadium and across the grounds toward the edge of the forest. "Nearly there, Ron," said Hermione as the gamekeeper's cabin came into view. "You'll be all right in a minute." "Almost there." They were within 20 feet of Hagrid's house when the front door opened, but it wasn't Hagrid who emerged. Gilderoy Lockhart, wearing robes of palest mauve, oh, so that's lilac, literally purple, came striding out. "Quick, behind here," Harry hissed, dragging Ron behind a nearby bush. Hermione followed somewhat reluctantly. "It's a simple matter if you know what you're doing," Lockhart said. Lockhart was saying loudly to Hagrid, "If you need help, you know where I am. I'll let you have a copy of my book. I'm surprised you haven't already got one. I'll sign one tonight and send it over. Well, goodbye." And he strode away toward the castle. Harry waited until Lockhart was out of sight, then pulled Ron out of the bush and up to Hagrid's front door. They knocked urgently. Hagrid appeared at once, looking very grumpy, but his expression brightened when he saw who it was. "Been running when you come to see me. Come in. Thought you might have been Professor Lockhart back again." Harry and Hermione supported Ron over the threshold into the one-roomed cabin, which had an enormous bed in one corner and a fire crackling merrily in another. Hagrid didn't seem perturbed by Ron's slug problem, which Harry hastily explained as he lowered Ron into a chair. "Better out than in," he said cheerfully, plunking a large copper basin in front of him. "Get 'em all up, Ron." "I don't think there's anything to do except wait for it to stop," said Hermione anxiously, watching Ron bend over the basin. "That's a difficult curse to work at best of times. But with a broken wand." Hagrid was bustling around making them tea. His boarhound Fang was slobbering over Harry. "What did Lockhart want with you, Hagrid?" Harry asked, scratching Fang's ears. "Giving me advice on kelpies out of a well. On getting kelpies. What the hell is a kelpie?" "I'm telling you, y'all, these Harry Potter critters." "What is a kelpie?" Making me think about Star Trek Discovery. What is Saru? A Kelpian. That's what he is. This is why I'm used to having an iPhone 13 mini, because my hands, I have small hands. I'm a petite lady. Trying to type with this phone with one hand is hilarious. There we go. Kelpie, Harry Potter. A Kelpie was a shape-shifting water demon native to Great Britain and Ireland, able to take any form. Jesus Christ. If I saw this underwater, I would shit on myself. Shit on myself. I'm trying to find like a good picture to show y'all. This one is so little. So basically, there's some pictures that are scarier than this. Giving me advice on getting kelpies out of a well, growled Hagrid, moving a half-plucked rooster off of his scrub table and setting down the teapot. Like I don't know. Ain't banging on about some banshee he banished. If one word of it was true, I'll eat my kettle. Okay, Hagrid, because I don't believe half the words that come out of that man's mouth either. It was most unlike Hagrid to criticize a Hogwarts teacher, and Harry looked at him in surprise. Hermione, however, said it in a voice somewhat higher than usual. I think you're being a bit unfair. Professor Dumbledore obviously thought he was the best man for the job. He was the only man for the job, said Hagrid, offering them a plate of treacle coffee. Treacle that's that sugar, right? That looked like molasses. Yeah, I think I remember that from our last session reading chapter 5 when I googled treacle tart. Okay, so that's good. Literally, that's some good toffee. While Ron coughed squelchingly into his basin, and I mean only one, getting very difficult to find anyone for the dark arts job. People aren't too keen to take it on, you see. They're starting to think it's jinxed. No one's lasted long for a while now. So tell me, said Hagrid, jerking his head at Ron. Who was he trying to curse? Malfoy called Hermione something. It must have been really bad because everyone went wild. It was bad, said Ron hoarsely, emerging over the tabletop looking pale and sweaty. Malfoy called her a mudblood, Hagrid. Ron dived out of sight again as a fresh wave of slugs made their appearance. Hagrid looked outraged. He didn't! He growled at Hermione. He did, she said. But I don't know what it means. I could tell it was really rude, of course. It's about the most insulting thing he could think of, gasped Ron, coming back up. Mudblood's a really foul name for someone who was muggle-born. You know, non-magic parents. There are some wizards, like Malfoy's family, who think they're better than everyone because they're what people call pure blood. He gave a small burp and a single slug fell into his outstretched hand. He threw it into the basin and continued. I mean, the rest of us know it doesn't make any difference at all. Look at Neville Longbottom. He's pure blood and can hardly stand a cauldron the right way up. Oh, bless his heart, poor Neville. And they haven't invented a spell our Hermione can't do, said Hagrid proudly, making Hermione go a brilliant shade of magenta. It's a disgusting thing to call someone, said Ron, wiping his sweaty brow with a shaking hand. Dirty blood, see. Common blood. It's ridiculous. Most wizards these days are half-blood anyway. If we hadn't married muggles, we'd have died out. So he literally called her a cunt. And I mean, because that's some disrespectful shit, Draco. Like, I already knew what a muggle was, obviously, from the movies. But, I mean, it was like he called her a cunt the way everybody was like, oh, no, Draco didn't. Like, that's low even for you. He retched and ducked out of sight again. Well, I don't blame you for trying to curse him, Ron, said Hagrid loudly over the thuds of more slugs hitting the basin. But maybe it was a good thing your wand backfired. Expect Lucius Malfoy wouldn't have come marching up to your school if you cursed his son. At least you're not in trouble. Harry would have pointed out that the trouble didn't come much worse than having slugs pouring out of your mouth, but he couldn't. Hagrid's treacle toffee had cemented his jaws together. Harry, said Hagrid abruptly as though stricken by a sudden thought. Got a bone to pick with you. I've heard you're giving out signed photos. How come I haven't got one? Furious, Harry wrenched his teeth apart. I have not been giving out signed photos, he said hotly. If Lockhart's still spreading that around. But then he saw Hagrid was laughing. I'm only joking, he said, patting Harry genially on the back and sending him face first into the table. Is that supposed to say gently? I've never seen that word spelled like that. Because obviously Hagrid is big and Harry is little. So a pat on the back from Hagrid is going to make your head go forward. But I got to Google this word. Genially. Oh, it means, yeah, in a cheerful, easygoing, or warm manner. There we go. I want to hear it pronounced.
Genial.
Oh, genial. Okay, genially. Okay, so I had it right. It just sounded like I said it wrong. Like I knew it was right, but it sounded like I said it wrong. I'm only joking, he said, patting Harry genially on the back and sending him face first into the table. I knew you hadn't really. I told Lockhart you didn't need to. You're more famous than him without even trying. Bet he didn't like that, said Harry, sitting up and rubbing his chin. Don't think he did, said Hagrid, his eyes twinkling. And then I told him I've never read one of his books and decided to go. And he decided to go. Oh boy, I know he ain't like that. The fact that Hagrid ain't never read one of his books. I mean, he was appalled. That's why he told Hagrid he was gonna send him a book. Treacle toffee, Ron? He added as Ron reappeared. No thanks, said Ron weakly. Better not risk it. Come and see what I've been growing, said Hagrid as Harry and Hermione finished the last of their tea. In the small vegetable patch behind Hagrid's house were a dozen of the largest pumpkins Harry had ever seen. Each was the size of a large boulder. Getting on well, aren't they? Said Hagrid happily. For the Halloween feast. Should be big enough by then. What have you been feeding them? Said Harry. Hagrid looked over his shoulder to check that they were alone. Well, I've been giving them, a bit of help. Harry noticed Hagrid's flowery pink umbrella leaning against the back of the wall of the cabin. Harry had reason to believe before now that this umbrella was not at all it looked. In fact, he had a strong impression that Hagrid's old school wand was concealed inside it. Hagrid wasn't supposed to use magic. He had been expelled from Hogwarts in his 3rd year, but Harry had never found out why. Any mention of the matter, and Hagrid would clear his throat loudly and become mysteriously deaf until the subject was changed. I mean, he could have been doing shit like Fred and George. I don't know. An engorgement charm, I suppose, said Hermione, halfway between disapproval and amusement. Well, you've done a good job on them. That's what your little sister said Hagrid, nodding at Ron. Met her just yesterday. Hagrid looked sideways at Harry, his beard twitching. Said she was just looking around the grounds, but I reckon she was hoping she might run into someone else in my house. He winked at Harry. If you ask me, she wouldn't say no to a sign. Oh, shut up, said Harry. Ron snorted with laughter, and the ground was sprayed with slugs. Ew! Watch it, Hagrid roared, pulling Ron away from his precious pumpkins. It was nearly lunchtime, and as Harry had only one bit of treacle toffee since dawn, he was keen to go back to school to eat. They said goodbye to Hagrid and walked back up to the castle. Ron had coughing occasionally, but only bringing up one or two very small slugs. They had barely set foot into the cool entrance hall when a voice rang out. There you are, Potter! Weasley! Professor McGonagall was walking toward them, looking stern. You will both do your detentions this evening. What are we doing, Professor? Said Ron nervously, suppressing a burp. You will be polishing the silver in the trophy room with Mr. Filch. Ew! Mr. Filch! Ain't that, goddamn Walder Frey? Yuck! Said Professor McGonagall. And no magic, Weasley. Elbow grease. Ron gulped. Argus Filch, the caretaker, was loathed by every student in the school. And you, Potter, will be helping Professor Lockhart answer his fan mail. Harry would have rather have polished silver with Ron. Okay, said Professor McGonagall. Oh, no, Professor. Can't I go to the trophy room too? Said Harry desperately. Certainly not, said Professor McGonagall, raising her eyebrows. Professor Lockhart requested you particularly. 8 o'clock sharp, both of you. Harry and Ron slouched into the great hall in states of deepest gloom. Hermione behind them, wearing a where you did break the school rules sort of expression. Harry didn't enjoy his shepherd's pie as much as he thought. Both he and Ron felt they'd gotten the worst deal. Filch will have me there all night, said Ron heavily. No magic. There must be 100 cups in that room. I'm no good at muggle cleaning. I swap anytime, said Harry hollowly. I've had loads of practice with the Dursleys answering. That's what I was going to say. Harry used to clean it up. Answering Lockhart's fan mail, he'll be a nightmare. Saturday afternoon seemed to melt away in what seemed like no time. It was 5 minutes to 8, and Harry was dragging his feet along the second floor corridor to Lockhart's office. He gritted his teeth and knocked. The door flew open at once. Lockhart beamed down at him. "Ah, here's the scallywag," he said. "Come on in, Harry. Come in." Shining brightly on the walls by the light of many candles were countless framed photographs of Lockhart. He had even signed a few of them. Another large pile lay on his desk. I mean, have we ever seen anyone? I mean, he might be worse than the Malfoys. God damn. Nobody cares, sir. You can address the envelopes, Lockhart told Harry, as though this was a huge treat. The first one's to Gladys Gudgeon. Blessed her. Huge fan of mine. The minutes snailed by. Harry let Lockhart's voice wash over him, occasionally saying, and right, and yeah. Now and then he caught a phrase like, fame's a fickle friend, Harry, or celebrity as celebrity does. Remember that. The candles burned lower and lower, making the light dance over the many moving faces of Lockhart watching them. Harry moved his aching hand over what felt like the 1,000th envelope, writing out Veronica Smethly's address. It must be nearly time to leave, Harry thought miserably. Please let it be nearly time. And then he heard something quite apart from the spitting of the dying candles and Lockhart's prattle about his fans. It was a voice to chill the bone marrow. Ooh, to chill the bone marrow. Ooh, now that's bone chilling. I don't think I've ever heard somebody describe bone chilling as that. Bone marrow is literally like the inside of your bones. So yeah. Ooh, I love that. It was a voice to chill the bone marrow, a voice of breathtaking, ice-cold venom. Come to me. Let me rip you. Let me tear you. Let me kill you. Ew, yuck, is that big V? Y'all, this gotta be V, man. It gotta be. Harry gave a huge jump and a large lilac blot appeared on Veronica Smethly's street. What? He said loudly. I know, said Lockhart. 6 solid months at the top of the bestseller list? Broke all records. No, Harry said frantically. That voice. Sorry, said Lockhart, looking puzzled. What voice? That voice that said, didn't you hear it? Lockhart was looking at Harry in high astonishment. What are you talking about, Harry? Perhaps you're getting a little drowsy? Great Scott, look at the time. We've been here nearly 4 hours. I'd never have believed it. The time's flown, hasn't it? Harry didn't answer. He was straining his ear to hear the voice again, but there was no sound except for Lockhart telling him he mustn't expect a treat like this every time he got detention. Feeling dazed, Harry left. It was so late that the Gryffindor common room was almost empty. Harry went straight up to the dormitory. Ron wasn't back yet. Harry pulled on his pajamas, got into bed, and waited. Half an hour later, Ron arrived, nursing his right arm and bringing a strong smell of polish into the darkened room. My muscles have all seized up, he groaned. Because you've been throwing up all day. Jesus, Ron. He groaned, sinking on his bed. 14 times he made me buff up that Quidditch. Oh, that's from polishing the cups. I forgot about that. 14 times he made me buff up that Quidditch cup before he was satisfied. And then I had another slug attack all over a special award for services to the school. Took ages to get the slime off. How was it with Lockhart? Keeping his voice so low as not to wake Neville, Dean, and Seamus, Harry told Ron exactly what he had heard. And Lockhart said he couldn't hear it, said Ron. Harry could see him frowning in the moonlight. Do you think he was lying? But I don't get it. Even someone invisible would have had to open the door. I know, said Harry, lying back in his four-poster and staring at the canopy above him. I don't get it either. Oh, and that is the end, my darlings. Y'all, should we read one more? So far, we are less than an hour and 15 minutes. We just read chapter 6 and 7. Let's go ahead and read chapter 8 so we can get all caught up. Let me see. Okay, let's just do chapter 8. Let's do it because. Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's just do 8. I'm bullshitting. Chapter 8, The Death Day Party. Y'all, who is hanging a cat from the goddamn? It's like a sconce, but it's not a sconce. When people are holding a thing with the fire, what is that called? Po kitty. Now, who done did that to that cat? Okay, this is the last chapter we're going to do, and then that way I'll be all caught up, and then going forward we will go back to our two, at least two per um chapter. I ate right before I got on here, so if y'all been seeing me licking my mouth, it's literally because I have food on my mouth. I'm sorry. I don't know how this chapter is gonna go, y'all, because it's about to get a little weird. We finna get back in the Voldemort territory. I can feel it. October arrived, spreading a damp chill over the grounds, and oh, well, it's October now. How fitting. October arrived, spreading a damp chill over the grounds and into the castle. Madame Pomfrey, the nurse, was kept busy by a sudden spat of coals among the staff and the students. Her pepper-up potion worked instantly, though it left the drinker smoking at the ears for several hours afterward. Ginny Weasley, who had been looking pale, was bullied into taking some by Percy. The steam pouring from under her vivid hair gave the impression that her whole head was on fire. Raindrops the size of bullets thundered on the castle windows for days on end. The lake rose, the flower beds turned into muddy streams, and Hagrid's pumpkins swelled to the size of garden sheds. Oliver Wood's enthusiasm for regular training sessions, however, was not dampened, which was why Harry was to be found, late one stormy Saturday afternoon, a few days before Halloween, returning to Gryffindor Tower, drenched to the skin and splattered with mud. How fitting they're talking about Halloween, and today is October 27th. Even aside from the rain and wind, it hadn't been a happy practice session. Fred and George, who had been spying on the Slytherin team, had seen for themselves the speed of those new Nimbus 2001s. They reported that the Slytherin team was no more than 7 greenish blurs, shooting through the air like missiles. As Harry squelched along the deserted corridor, he came across somebody who looked just as preoccupied as he was. Nearly headless Nick, the ghost of Gryffindor Tower, was staring morosely out of a window, muttering under his breath, "Don't fulfill their requirements. Half an inch, if that." "Hello, Nick," said Harry. "Hello, hello," said nearly headless Nick, staring and looking around. He wore a dashing plumed hat in his long curly hair, and a tunic with a ruff, which concealed the fact that his neck was almost completely severed. He was pale as smoke, and Harry could see right through him to the dark sky and torrential rain outside. "You look troubled, young Potter," said Nick, folding a transparent letter as he spoke and tucking it inside his doublet. "So do you," said Harry. "Ah," nearly headless Nick waved an elegant hand. "A matter of no importance. It's not as though I really wanted to join, though I'd apply, but apparently I don't fulfill the requirements." In spite of his airy tone, there was a look of great bitterness on his face. "But you would think, wouldn't you?" he erupted suddenly, pulling the letter back out of his pocket, "that getting hit 45 times in the neck with a blunt axe will qualify you to join the headless hunt?" "Oh, yes," said Harry, who was obviously supposed to agree. "I mean, nobody wishes more than I do that it had all been quick and clean, and my head had come off properly. I mean, it would have saved me a great deal of pain and ridicule. However," nearly headless Nick shook his letter upon and opened and read furiously, "we can only accept huntsmen whose heads have parted company with their bodies." Let me start over. However, nearly headless Nick shook his letter open and read furiously, "We can only accept huntsmen whose heads have parted completely with their bodies." Why do I keep saying a different word? It literally says company. "We can only accept huntsmen whose heads have parted company with their bodies. You will appreciate that it will be impossible otherwise for members to appreciate." Y'all, now I done sat here and read 2 chapters perfectly, and now I'm bullshitting on chapter 3. "We can only accept huntsmen whose heads parted company with their bodies. You will appreciate that it would be impossible otherwise for members to participate in hunt activities such as horseback head juggling and head polo. It is with greatest regret, therefore, that I must inform you that you do not fulfill our requirements. With very best wishes, Sir Patrick Delaney Podmore." Fuming, nearly headless Nick stuffed the letter away. Half an inch of skin and sinew holding my neck on, Harry. Most people would have think that's good and beheaded, but oh no, it's not enough for Sir Properly Decapitated Podmore. Nearly headless Nick took several deep breaths and then said, in a far calmer tone, "So, what's bothering you? Anything I can do?" "No," said Harry. "Not unless you know where you can get 7 free Nimbus 2001s for our match against Slith." The rest of Harry's sentence was drowned out by a high-pitched mewling from somewhere near his ankles. He looked down and found himself gazing into a pair of lamp-like yellow eyes. I was about to say, that's that damn cat. And it literally says, it was Mrs. Norris, the skeletal gray cat that was used by the caretaker, Argus Filch, as a sort of deputy in his endless battle against students. "You better get out of here, Harry," said Nick quickly. "Filch isn't in a good mood. He's got the flu, and some third years accidentally plastered frog brains all over the ceiling in Dungeon 5. Yeah, baby, Walter Frey is not having it, okay? He's been cleaning all morning, and if he sees you dripping mud all over the place..." "Right," said Harry, backing away from the accusing stare of Mrs. Norris, but not quickly enough. Drawn to the spot by the mysterious power that seemed to connect him with his foul cat, Argus Filch burst suddenly through a tapestry to Harry's right, wheezing and looking wildly about for the rule breaker. There was a thick tartan scarf bound around his head, and his nose was unusually purple. "Filth!" he shouted, his jowls a-quiver, his eyes popping alarmingly as he pointed at the muddy puddle that had dripped from Harry's Quidditch robes. "Mess and muck everywhere! I've had enough of it, I tell you! Follow me, Potter!" So Harry waved a gloomy goodbye to nearly headless Nick and followed Filch back downstairs, doubling the number of muddy footprints on the floor. Harry had never been inside Filch's office before. It was a place most students avoided. The room was dingy and windowless. Damn, he ain't got no windows. Lit by a single oil lamp dangling from the low ceiling. A faint smell of fried fish. That was not in my bingo card. Why Filch's office smell like fried fish? Nigga, what is this? A JJ's? Like, come on now. A faint smell of fried fish lingered about the place. Wooden filing cabinets stood around the walls. From their labels, Harry could see that they contained the details of every pupil Filch had ever punished. Fred and George Weasley had an entire drawer to themselves. A highly polished collection of chains and manacles hung on the wall behind Filch's desk. It was common knowledge that he was always begging Dumbledore to let him suspend students by their ankles from the ceiling. This man is sick. He liked to torture. Filch grabbed a quill from a pot on his desk and began shuffling around looking for parchment. Dang. Oh, dung. That says dung. So he's saying shit. "Dung," he muttered furiously. "Great sizzling dragon bogies, frog brains, rat intestines. I've had enough of it. Making example. Where's the form?" "Yes." He retrieved a large roll of parchment from his desk drawer and stretched it out in front of him, dipping his long black quill into the ink pot. "Name? Harry Potter." "Crime." "It was only a bit of mud," said Harry. "It was only a bit of mud to you, boy, but to me it's an extra hour of scrubbing," shouted Filch, a drip shivering unpleasantly at the end of his bulbous nose. "Crime? Befouling the castle?" "Suggested sentence," dabbling at his streaming nose. Quotes squinted unpleasantly at Harry, who waited with bated breath for his sentence to fall. But as Filch lowered his quill, there was a great bang on the ceiling of the office, which made the oil lamp rattle. "Peeves!" Filch roared, flinging down his quill in a transport of rage. "I'll have you this time! I'll have you!" And without a backward glance at Harry, Filch ran flat-footed from the office, Mrs. Norris streaking alongside him. "See, Harry, you better get the fuck on. That was your chance. Peeves just saved you. You better run." Peeves was a school poltergeist, a grinning, airborne menace who lived to cause havoc and distress. Harry didn't much like Peeves, but couldn't help feeling grateful for his timing. Hopefully, whatever Peeves had done, and it sounded though he'd wrecked something very big this time, would distract Filch from Harry. Thinking that he should probably wait for Filch to come back, Harry sank into a moth-eaten chair next to the desk. There was only one thing on it from his half-completed form, a large glossy purple envelope with silver lettering on the front. With a quick glance at the door to check that Filch wasn't on his way back, Harry picked up the envelope and read. See, Harry is different because what I would have did was is I would have took that piece of paper and took it with me and threw it in the fireplace in the Gryffindor common room is what I would have did. Quick spell. A correspondence course in beginner's magic. Intrigued, Harry flipped open the envelope and pulled out the sheaf of parchment inside. More curly silver writing on the front page said, "Feel out of step in the world of modern magic? Find yourself making excuses not to perform simple spells? Ever been taunted from your wonderful wand work? There is an answer. Quick Spell is an all-new, fail-safe, quick result, easy learn course. Hundreds of witches and wizards have benefited from the Quick Spell method. Madam Z. Nettles of Topsham writes, I have no memory from incantations and my potions were a family joke. Now, after a quick spell course, I am the center of attention at parties, and friends beg for the recipe of my scintillation solution. Warlock DJ Pride of Disbury says, my wife used to sneer at my feeble charms, but 1 month in your fabulous quick spell course, and I succeeded in turning her into a yak. Thank you, quick spell. This sounds like a fucking handwritten cursive infomercial. Like, it's literally in cursive in this book. Fascinated, Harry thumbed through the rest of the envelope's contents. Why on earth did Filch want a quick spell course? Didn't this mean he wasn't a proper wizard? Harry was just reading Lesson 1, Holding Your Wand, Some Useful Tips. When shuffling footsteps outside told him Filch was coming back, stuffing the parchment back into the envelope, Harry threw it back onto the desk just as the door opened. Filch was looking triumphant. That vanishing cabinet was extremely valuable, he was saying gleefully to Mrs. Norris. We'll have Peeves out this time, my sweet. His eyes fell on Harry and then darted to the quick spell envelope, which Harry realized was too late, was lying 2 feet away from where it had started. Filch's pasty face went brick red. Harry braced himself for the tidal wave of fury. Filch hobbled across his desk, snatched up the envelope, and threw it into a drawer. Did you read? He sputtered. No, Harry lied quickly. Filch's knobbly hands were twisted together. If I thought you'd read my private, not that it's mine, for a friend. Be that as it may, however, Harry was staring at him alarmed. Filch had never looked madder. His eyes were popping. A tick was going in one of his pouchy cheeks, and the tartan scarf didn't help. Very well, go, and don't breathe a word. Not that, however, if you didn't read. Go now. I have to write up Peeves' report. Go. Amazed at his luck, Harry sped out of the office, up the corridor, and back upstairs. To escape from Filch's office without a punishment was probably some kind of school record. Harry, did it work? Nearly Headless Nick came gliding out of a classroom. Behind him, Harry could see the wreckage of a large black and gold cabinet that appeared to have been dropped from a great height. I persuaded Peeves to crash it right over Filch's office, said Nick eagerly. Thought it might distract him. Was that you? Said Harry gratefully. Yeah, it worked. I didn't even get detention. Thanks, Nick. They set up off the corridor. Nearly Headless Nick, Harry noticed, was still holding Sir Patrick's rejection letter. I wish there was something I could do for you about the Headless Hunt, Harry said. Nearly Headless Nick stopped in his tracks and walked right through him. He wished he hadn't. It was like stepping through an icy shower. But there is something you could do for me, said Nick excitedly. Harry, would I be asking too much? But no, you wouldn't want. What is it? Said Harry. Well, this Halloween will be my 500th death day, said Nearly Headless Nick, drawing himself up and looking dignified. Oh, said Harry, not sure whether he'd look sorry or happy about this. Right. I'm holding a party down in one of the roomier dungeons. Friends will be coming from all over the country. It would be such an honor if you would attend. Mr. Weasley and Mrs. Granger would be most welcome too, of course, but I dare say you'd rather go to school feast. He watched Harry on tenterhooks. No, said Harry quickly. I'll come. My dear boy, Harry Potter at my death day party. And, he hesitated, looking excited, do you think you could possibly mention to Sir Patrick how very frightening and impressing you find me? Oh, of course, said Harry. Nearly headless Nick beamed at him. A death day party? Said Hermione keenly when Harry had changed at last and joined her and Ron in the common room. I bet there aren't many living people who can say they've been to one of those. It'll be fascinating. Why would anyone want to celebrate the day they died? Said Ron, who was halfway through his potions homework and grumpy. Sounds dead depressing to me. Rain was still lashing the windows, which were now an inky black, but inside looked bright and cheerful. The firelight glowed over the countless squashy armchairs where people sat reading, talking, doing homework, or in case of Fred and George Weasley, trying to find out what would happen if you fed a filibuster firework to a salamander. Fred had rescued the brilliant orange fire-dwelling lizard from a care of magical creatures class that was now smoldering gently on a table surrounded by a knot of curious people. Harry was at the point of telling Ron and Hermione about Filch in the quick spell course when the salamander suddenly whizzed into the air, emitting loud sparks and bangs as it whirled wildly around the room. The sight of Percy bellowing himself hoarse at Fred and George, the spectacular display of in front of them, tangerine stars showering from the salamander's mouth and its escape into the fire with accompanying explosions, drove both Filch and the quick spell envelope from Harry's mind. By the time Halloween arrived, Harry was regretting his rash promise to go to the Death Day party. The rest of the school was happily anticipating their Halloween feast. The Great Hall had been decorated with the usual live bats. Hagrid's vast pumpkins had been carved into lanterns large enough for 3 men to sit in. And there were rumors that Dumbledore had booked a troupe of dancing skeletons for the entertainment. My thing is, Harry, is you can go to the Death Day party and the feast. Just go to the party early, show your face, make sure Nick see you. When all the guests get there and everybody mingling, you just leave. Like, you don't have to stay there the whole time. A promise is a promise, Hermione reminded Harry bossily. You said you go to the Death Day party. So at 7 o'clock, Harry, Ron, and Hermione walked straight past the doorway to the packed Great Hall. Oh, good, they going with Harry. Oh, I've been sitting in that one position for a while. Hold on. Woo! So at 7 o'clock, Harry, Ron, and Hermione walked straight past the doorway to the packed Great Hall, which was glittering invitingly with gold plates and candles, and directed their steps instead toward the dungeons. The passageway leading to Nearly Headless Nick's party had been lined with candles too, though the effect was far from cheerful. These were long, thin, jet black tapers, all burning bright blue, casting a dim, ghostly light even over their own living faces. The temperature dropped with every step they took, as Harry shivered and drew his robes tightly around him. He heard what sounded like 1,000 fingernails scraping an enormous blackboard. Don't nobody want to hit that shit. Is that supposed to be music? Ron whispered. They turned a corner and saw Nearly Headless Nick standing at the doorway, hung with black velvet drapes. My dear friends, he said mournfully, welcome, welcome. So pleased you could come. He swept off his plumed hat and bowed them inside. It was an incredible sight. The dungeon was full of hundreds of pearly white, translucent people, mostly drifting around a crowded dance floor, waltzing to the dreadful quavering sound of 30 musical saws, played by an orchestra on the raised black draped platform. A chandelier overhead blazed midnight blue with 1,000 more black candles. Their breath rose in the mist before them. It was like stepping into a freezer. Shall we have a look around? Harry suggested, wanting to warm up his feet. Careful not to walk through anyone, said Ron nervously, and they set off around the edge of the dance floor. They passed a group of gloomy nuns, a ragged man wearing chains, and the fat friar, a cheerful Hufflepuff ghost who was talking to a knight with an arrow sticking out of his forehead. Harry wasn't surprised to see that the Bloody Baron, a gaunt, staring Slytherin ghost covered in silver bloodstains, was being given a wide berth by another ghost. Oh no, said Hermione, stopping abruptly. Turn back, turn back. I don't want to talk to the Moaning Myrtle. Oh, that's the girl from the bathroom, Moaning Myrtle. Who? Said Harry as they backtracked quickly. She haunts one of the toilets in the girls' bathroom on the first floor, said Hermione. She haunts a toilet? Yes. It's been out of order all year because she keeps having tantrums and flooding the place. I've never went in there anyway if I could avoid it. It's awful trying to have a pee with her wailing at you. Look, food, said Ron. On the other side of the dungeon was a long table, also covered in black velvet. They approached it eagerly, but the next moment had stopped in their tracks, horrified. The smell was quite disgusting. Large, rotten fish were laid on handsome silver platters. I was wondering if the food was going to be edible. I really was, and now I have my answer. Large, rotten fish were laid on handsome silver platters. Cakes, burned charcoal black, were heaped on salvers. There was a great ew, 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 maggoty haggis. Do y'all know what haggis is? That's fucking disgusting. I don't even want to explain it because I know what haggis is. Just know it's a blend of, it's nasty. Maggoty haggis. Haggis with maggots. I cannot. A slab of cheese covered in furry green mold, and in pride of place, an enormous gray cake in the shape of a tombstone with tar-like icing forming the words, Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington, died 31st of October, 1492. Harry watched, amazed, as a portly ghost approached the table, crouched low, and walked through it, his mouth held wide open so that it passed through one of the stinking salmon. Can you taste it if you walk through it? Harry asked him. Almost, said the ghost sadly, and he drifted away. I was about to give y'all a whole thing on feeding spirits, but we're not even finna get into that today. I expect they've let it rot to give it a stronger flavor, said Hermione knowledgeably, pinching her nose and leaning closer to look at the putrid haggis. Can we move? I feel sick, said Ron. They had barely turned around, however, when a little man swooped suddenly from under the table and came to a halt midair before them. Who is a little man? Y'all, it's Peeves, which Harry say he don't too much care for Peeves, but we'll see. Hello, Peeves, said Harry cautiously. Unlike the ghosts around them, Peeves the poltergeist was the very reverse of pale and transparent. He was wearing a bright orange party hat, a revolting bow tie, and a broad grin on his wide, wicked face. Nibbles? He said sweetly, offering them a bowl of peanuts covered in fungus. No thanks, said Hermione. Heard you talking about poor Myrtle, said Peeves with his eyes dancing. Rude you was about poor Myrtle. He took a deep breath and bellowed, Oi, Myrtle! See, this is why Harry don't like you, because why would you call that girl over here? Oh, no, Peeves, don't tell her what I said. She'll be really upset, Hermione whispered frantically. I didn't mean it. I don't mind her. Hello, Myrtle. The squat ghost of a girl had glided over. She had the gloomiest face Harry had ever seen, half hidden behind lank hair and thick pearly spectacles. What? She said sulkily. How are you, Myrtle? Said Hermione in a falsely bright voice. It's nice to see you out of the toilet, Myrtle sniffled. Miss Granger was just talking about you, said Peeves slyly in Myrtle's ear. Just saying. Saying how nice you look tonight, said Hermione, glaring at Peeves. Myrtle eyed Hermione suspiciously. You're making fun of me, she said. Hold on, I'm trying not to laugh. Silver tears welling rapidly in her small see-through eyes. No, honestly. Didn't I just say how nice Myrtle's looking? Said Hermione, nudging Harry and Ron painfully in the ribs. Oh, yeah, she did. Don't lie to me, Myrtle gasped, tears now flooding down her face while Peeves chuckled happily over her shoulder. Do you think I know what people call me behind my back? Fat Myrtle, ugly Myrtle, miserable, moaning, moping Myrtle. You forgot Pimply, Peeves hissed in her ear. Moaning Myrtle burst into anguished sobs and fled from the dungeon. Peeves shot after her, pelting her with moldy peanuts, yelling, Pimply, Pimply. Dude, y'all, this boy is hell. Oh dear, said Hermione sadly. First of all, if I was Myrtle, I would haunt Peeves. I would not let that nigga sleep. Every time he would be in class, I would pull his chair out when he tried to sit down so he would fall. Every time he had breakfast, he tried to pick up food, put it in his mouth. I'd knock that shit on the floor. Boy, what? Mm-mm. Nearly Headless Nick now drifted toward them through the crowd. Enjoying yourselves? Oh, yes, they lied. Not a bad turnout, said Nearly Headless Nick proudly. The Wailing Widow came all the way from Kent. It's nearly time for my speech. I better go and warn the orchestra. The orchestra, however, stopped playing at that very moment. They and everyone else in the dungeon fell silent, looking around in excitement as a hunting horn sounded. A hunting horn? Oh, here we go, said Nearly Headless Nick bitterly. Through the dungeon wall Through the dungeon wall burst a dozen ghost horses, each ridden by a headless horseman. The assembly clapped wildly. Harry started to clap too, but stopped quickly at the sight of Nick's face. I figured it was going to be these people. The horses galloped in the middle of the dance floor and halted, rearing and plunging. At the front of the pack was a large ghost who held his bearded head under his arm, from which position he was blowing the horn. The ghost leapt down, lifted his head high in the air so he could see over the crowd. Everyone laughed. And strode over to Nearly Headless Nick, squashing his head back onto his neck. Nick! He roared. How are you? Head still hanging in there? He gave a hearty guffaw. Is that like his type of laugh? Hold on, I gotta Google that, y'all. Guffaw. I got to Google that. I ain't never heard that word. Guffaw.
Guffaw. Guffaw.
Guffaw. I don't have that damn accent. It's guffaw in my accent. Um, it is a loud and boisterous laugh. So yes, I was correct. Okay. He gave a hearty guffaw and clapped Nearly Headless Nick on the shoulder. Welcome, Patrick, said Nick stiffly. Livens. Livens. That's what he's saying about people that are alive. I actually love that. It's literally spelled LIVE'_UNS. But also their children. Y'all know like how Southern Americans be saying cheering. That's what that's making me think about. I know that ain't what they use it for, but yeah. Livens. Instead of saying like children or live people, whatever. I know what he means by that. I actually like that word. Said Sir Patrick, spotting Harry, Ron, and Hermione and giving a huge fake jump of astonishment so that his head fell off again. The crowd howled with laughter. He literally be doing all that shit with his head because people think it's funny. Like, calm down, sir. Like, we get it. Your head is off. Still upset we won't let him join the hunt. But I mean, look at the fellow. No, I missed like 2 sentences. Very amusing, said Nearly Headless Nick darkly. Don't mind Nick, shouted Sir Patrick's head from the floor. Still upset we won't let him join the hunt. But I mean to say, look at the fellow. I think, said Harry hurriedly at a meaningful look from Nick. Nick's very frightening. And ha! Yelled Sir Patrick's head. Betty asked you to say that. If I could have everyone's attention, it's time for my speech, said Nearly Headless Nick loudly, striding toward the podium, climbing into an icy blue spotlight. My late lamented lords, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great sorrow. But nobody heard much more. Sir Patrick and the rest of the Headless Hunt had just started a game of head hockey, and the crowd was turning to watch. First of all, what y'all not gonna do is come to my party and upstage me. Nearly Headless Nick tried to vainly recapture his audience, but gave up as Sir Patrick's head went sailing past him to loud cheers. Harry was very cold by now, not to mention hungry. I can't stand much more of this, Ron muttered, his teeth chattering as the orchestra ground back into action and the ghost swept back onto the dance floor. Let's go, Harry agreed. They backed toward the door, nodding and beaming at anyone who looked at them, and a minute later were hurrying back up the passageway full of black candles. Pudding might not be finished yet, said Ron hopefully, leading the way toward the steps to the entrance hall. And then Harry heard it. Rip, tear, kill. It was the same voice, The same cold, murderous voice he had heard in Lockhart's office. He stumbled. Look, I'm reading this because I've never read these books before. And it's really just my instant, it's my first impression, it's my reaction. I'd be so tempted to get into like a full random character when I'm reading this, like rip, tear, kill. It was the same voice, the same cold, murderous voice he had heard in Lockhart's office. He stumbled to a halt, clutching at the stone wall, listening with all his might, looking around, squinting up and down the dimly lit passageway. Harry, what are you? It's that voice again. Shut up a minute. So hungry for so long. Listen, said Harry urgently, and Ron and Hermione froze, watching him. Kill. Time to kill. The voice growing fainter. Harry was sure it was moving away, moving upward. A mixture of fear and excitement gripped him as he stared at the dark ceiling. How could it be moving upward? Was it a phantom to whom stone ceilings didn't matter? This way, he shouted, and he began to run up the stairs into the entrance hall. It was no good hoping to hear anything here. The babble of talk from the Halloween feast was echoing out of the great hall. Harry sprinted up the marble staircase to the first floor, Ron and Hermione clattering behind him. Harry, what are we? Shh! Harry strained his ears. Distantly from the floor above, and growing fainter still, he heard the voice. I smell blood. I smell blood. His stomach lurched. It's going to kill someone, he shouted, and ignoring Ron and Hermione's bewildered faces, he ran up the next flight of steps 3 at a time, trying to listen over his own pounding footsteps. Harry hurtled around the whole of the second floor, Ron and Hermione panting behind him, not stopping until they turned a corner into the last deserted passage. Harry, what was all that about? Said Ron, wiping sweat off his face. I couldn't hear anything. But Hermione gave a sudden gasp, pointing down the corridor. Look! Something was shining on the wall ahead. They approached slowly, squinting through the darkness. Foot-high words had been daubed on the wall between 2 windows, shimmering in the light cast by the flaming torches. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of air, beware. Enemies of the air. Remember they was talking about that closet in the beginning that Peeves be bothering. And how nearly headless Nick had Peeves knock over that cabinet. What's that thing hanging underneath? Said Ron, a slight quiver in his voice. As they edged nearer, Harry almost slipped. There was a large puddle of water on the floor. Ron and Hermione grabbed him, and they inched toward the message, eyes fixed on a dark shadow beneath it. All 3 of them suddenly realized what it was at once and leapt backward with a splash. Mrs. Norris, the caretaker's cat, was hanging by her tail from the torch bracket. She was stiff as a board, her eyes wide and staring. First of all, I have 2 cats. I absolutely love cats. They are gods in feline form. Do you hear me? There's nothing more beautiful, graceful, intelligent, physically strong than a cat. Okay? I love cats. Why they do Mrs. Norris like that? I don't even like Filch. Because the fact that the actor is Walder Frey, me seeing Game of Thrones first before Harry Potter, sends me. So I already don't like Argus Filch. Also, he hates kids. Why you work at a school if you hate kids? Because you want to punish kids. But why y'all do Mrs. Norris like that? For a few seconds, they didn't move. I hope they don't get blamed for this, by the way. For a few seconds, they didn't move. Then Ron said, let's get out of here. Shouldn't we try to help? Harry began awkwardly. Trust me, Ron said. We don't want to be found here. But it was too late. A rumble, as though of distant thunder, told them that the feast had just ended. From either end of the corridor where they stood came the sound of hundreds of feet climbing the stairs and the loud, happy talk of well-fed people. Next moment, students were crashing into the passage from both ends. The chatter, the bustle, the noise died suddenly as the people in front spotted the hanging cat. Harry, Ron, and Hermione stood alone in the middle of the corridor as the silence fell among the mass of students pressing forward to see the grisly sight. Then someone shouted through the quiet, Enemies of the air, beware. You'll be next, mudbloods. I mean, of course, it was Malfoy. It was Draco Malfoy. He had pushed to the front of the crowd, his eyes cold, his cold eyes alive, his usual bloodless face flushed as he grinned at the sight of the hanging, immobile cat. I hope Miss Norris ain't dead. They just put a little spell on her and froze her, because don't do her. Ooh, that was the end of the chapter, y'all. Enemies of the air, beware! You'll be next, mudbloods! It was Draco Malfoy. He had pushed to the front of the crowd, his cold eyes alive, his usually bloodless face flushed as he grinned at the sight of the hanging, immobile cat. And that was Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, chapter 8. We just read chapters 6, 7, and 8. That was good. Shit, I could have kept reading. But we are no longer behind. We did 3 chapters today because last week I did 1. So, y'all, these books is good. They really are. Just stay tuned.